You're listening to author Jason Lee Willis read The Summerbird. This is chapter 46, Running Scared. 36th Street Northwest, February 13th, 1998. When the school van stopped at the ninth grader's isolated farmhouse, Cassie called out, "Have a good day, Lucas." Lucas paused in the open door. You too, Cassandra. It was nice to meet you. May the force be with you, Clay added loudly, and then softly said to her, "He's not usually that nice." Winter had thawed, drove into sub-zero temperatures, and then returned with a foot of snow when the temperatures rose back into the 20s. The drive out into the country proved to be surprisingly scenic and finally matched the type of winter she'd expected. "You have to come all the way out here, even though your house is only a mile from the school?" Clay nodded. "Every day." With those long legs, it'd be easier to have him dropped off last so the other two weren't in his way, the van driver explained. "We tried it the other way, didn't we, Clay?" Clay nodded sheepishly and then had his attention stolen. "That's Spider Lake over there." Cassie was used to his random squirrel moments. She looked out the window, and aside from the rise of trees, she couldn't see the lake that Clay referenced. Lucas McGovern lived on a gravel road. The terrain was relatively flat, but covered in low brush and patches of birch trees and pine trees. Movement caught Cassie's eyes, and a pack of 3 dogs came out of the tall grass to rush the van. "They always do that," Clay said with an eye roll. "Every day it's the same thing. You think they'd just give up." Cassie jumped when she heard one of the dogs actually make contact with one of the wheels. After biting at the tires, all 3 ran off, tails wagging. Cassie couldn't help but smile at their efforts. Having dropped off the other 2 passengers, the van was suddenly quiet, and Cassie and Clay sitting in the back seat together, and Arlo, the van driver, peeking in his rearview mirror like an observant chaperone. Cassie loved the scenery, and the van route offered her a new view of Hiawatha County. It's crazy to think all of this used to be the big woods until logging cleared it away. Granted, there's still a lot of tree growth, but it's all regrown in the past century. Clay loved to banter with facts. "There's a patch of original forest called the Lost 40. My mom took me there when I was in 7th grade. It has some red pines that are almost 400 years old. How do you know about the big woods?" My mom gave me the Little House in the Prairie books when I was a kid. I loved Little House in the Big Woods. She gently steered the conversation and asked, "Do you know anything about willow trees?" Clay's face tightened. "But it's still winter." "What?" "It's still winter." "Why would you ask me about willow trees now?" Cassie chuckled at the awkward retort. "I asked if you know anything about willow trees." The tension in Clay's face departed. "Well, yeah, of course. They're sallows, which are different from conifers or hardwoods, and in winter they drop their foliage. Why are you asking about willows?" Cassie shrugged, unable to explain that a dead girl mentioned a willow tree. We were talking about logging." Then she quickly lied, adding, "We had a willow in my backyard in Baltimore, but all I see around here are birches and pines." "Oh," Clay said, relaxing further. "Willows like to live near water. The word salix is from the old Celtic meaning near and water. Baltimore is by a river, isn't it?" "I guess that confirms I'll find the tree near water." "It is, the Patapsco." "Never heard of it. My dad took me up and down the creek and river that fed My dad took me up and down every creek and river that fed into the Chesapeake Bay." "My dad's sick." "He is?" "Something wrong with his bones." "Leukemia?" "Yeah, I think so. He was so strong when I was little. Now he struggles to get out of bed." "Maybe I shouldn't come over to your house." "Oh, it'll be fine. He's not getting any treatments right now. If he's sick, he just stays in bed and rests." Clay looked out the window and returned with a new focus. "So, my mom used to babysit your mom when she was little." "Really?" It was news to her. She told me about what happened to your mom and how they used to be neighbors. It was before I was born, though. Same, Cassie chuckled. For some reason, she fretted the entire way back into town, and by the time they crossed Doc Jones Bridge, almost felt sick to her stomach. Yet, instead of hopping out at her house, she stayed as Arlo dropped both of them off at the big McPherson farm. You've got a great farm, Cassie said as they began walking up the sidewalk that greeted them at the edge of the gravel lot. Your barn is way bigger in person. Clay shrugged. The McPherson home was equally impressive. The towering 3-story structure was painted lavender with white trim. The front screen door was attached to a small porch, and even before they reached the door, music greeted them. Your mom must be rocking out, Cassie teased. As soon as the door opened, Cassie recognized the song and voice from the 60s. Clay tossed his jacket and backpack on the floor and immediately went into the kitchen doorway. Cassie followed. Mrs. McPherson was a middle-aged woman with wide hips, large cleavage, and a head of permed blonde hair. She was dressed in a silky shirt, a hand-decorated vest, and polyester pants. Her socks allowed her to spin and slide on the linoleum floor, and she held a sponge mop in her hand like a microphone. As the song built louder and louder, the 60s crooners sang, "It's over, it's over, it's over," until Mrs. McPherson slumped into stillness. Cassie audibly chuckled at the theatrics and set down her bag and coat. In the space between songs, Mrs. McPherson sprang back to life and rushed over to the doorway. She grabbed both of them by their wrists and pulled them to a small kitchen table, where she sat on the opposite side. Kids these days have no appreciation for quality music. Do you know who this is? A new song began to play. Like the first, it had a simple arrangement. An acoustic guitar strummed. Sounds like Elvis? Cassie guessed. Elvis? Mrs. McPherson recoiled. At first impression, Cassie assumed the woman was drunk or on drugs. The first lyrics identified the song title, Just Running Scared. This is Roy Orbison. Listen to his voice. Clay sat wide-eyed, a sign it was atypical behavior for his mother. What did I walk into? Mrs. McPherson closed her eyes and began to rock gently to the crescendo in the music. The CD player rested on the table between them. Suddenly, Mrs. McPherson was in motion again. She rose and came around the table to take Cassie by the hand and pull her to her feet. Clay won't dance with me, and Duncan, well, she held Cassie's hand and gently swayed. A voice like an angel, Mrs. McPherson said in a whisper after a minute passed. They rocked side to side. Cassie locked eyes with Clay, who went from a look of horror to a sheepish grin. The music shifted, and Mrs. McPherson stepped back to do a pirouette while still touching fingers with Cassie. When Roy Orbison's voice raised an octave in the song's climax, she pushed away and held her arms to her chest with her closed eyes facing upwards. Sit, sit, she said in the sudden silence as the song ended. She, too, went back to the small table, and with a folksy bass riff from the opening of Dream Baby began to play, Mrs. McPherson found the stop button on the CD player. So, you've come to fix everything, is that it? Fix everything? What's wrong with her? We're working on his presentation, Cassie explained. Clay said he spoke to you about me coming over today. Oh, I know who you are. We used to talk about you while working in the garden, and now, up the waterspout you've crawled. Why are you here? Something's lost in translation here. I just wanted to help Clay practice for his presentation. His teacher suggested it. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Something like that. Mrs. McPherson seemed to have an internal argument with herself before returning her gaze to Cassie. You're just as cute as a button, aren't you? No wonder Clay won't shut up about you. I could have been you. I should have been you. Now look at me. A sad lump. You'd hardly believe it. Mrs. McPherson's hand darted out from across the table to catch hold of Cassie's hand. She flinched, but went along with it, sensing more sadness than danger from Clay's mother. Mrs. McPherson overturned her wrist as she turned Cassie's arm to expose her wrist as well. You and I are not that different. The same curse in my veins flows in yours. I'm a dreamer too, but I didn't write any of it down or listen to it. Did Clay tell you about his brother Levi? Cassie nodded once. Thick as thieves, those two were, she said, and turned her searing gaze to Clay, who immediately wilted. Is she having a nervous breakdown? A dead son, a dying husband, her youngest about to graduate? What's her deal? Do you want me to leave? It wouldn't matter if I did. I can't stop it if I wanted to. Yet Clay keeps counting up the minutes like it's a good thing. Maybe I'm being punished for not helping, but if you are who I think you are, then, Missy, my pain and suffering is nothing compared to what you're going to endure. You should run and never look back. Okay, I can take a hint. I'll get going, Cassie said and stood slowly. Mrs. McPherson then chuckled playfully and her tone lightened. Oh, don't listen to me. What do I know? Stay, listen to some more music. Suddenly the CD blasted Pretty Woman, but Cassie found her jacket and bag in the entryway. A moment later, she was outside. It felt like she'd walked into a dream, but Mrs. McPherson's words and actions all seemed like a desperate plea for help, and none of it made any sense. Cassie pulled her coat zipper all the way to her chin. That was a bad typo. It had always been her plan to walk home afterwards, since the half-mile distance would only take a few minutes to traverse. She hadn't even made it to the end of the driveway when she heard the screen door slam. Clay came bounding down the driveway towards her. Sorry about that. She's not normally like that. What was that? She was like that a lot after Levi, and I think my dad's illness and me graduating made her really sad again. No offense, but it was pretty weird. Cassie turned to study him as he walked beside her. What are you doing? I'm walking you home. You sure she's cool with that? She told me to walk you home. She knows. Knows what? The truth about this place. Clay grew quiet, and the two of them walked several paces in silence. Mrs. McPherson wasn't a ghost or a raven, but still chilled Cassie to the bone with her vague yet terrifying words. But Clay? He hardly seemed fazed by what had happened. Hey, I've got an idea, Clay offered. We can practice my speech while we walk. How about that? Yeah, sure, she said, and while Clay began to recite his presentation from memory, Cassie came to a sudden and disturbing realization. Is he faking his autism? Is it all an act? Chapter 47, Princess Peach, Brainerd, Minnesota, March 13th, 1998. At Split Rock High School, winter officially ended when the Bulldogs lost to rival Wadena Deer Creek in a Friday the 13th championship matchup hosted in Brainerd. All the school spirit shown leading up to the big game evaporated, and the bus ride home was like a funeral procession. When the bus pulled up to the front of the school, she spotted her dad's truck waiting in the parking lot. I listened to the game on the radio, Jay said when he saw her. A tough break with that foul call at the end. Derek Gregory started crying. He had to hide his head in a towel until the game was over. It was sad, but in a pathetic sort of way. Your mom said one of the reasons she wanted to leave Split Rock was that everybody knew your business. A big game like that might be the best thing that ever happens to Derek Gregory's life. He'll have to wear it like a badge of shame for the rest of his life. What could have been? Well, I don't feel sorry for him, Cassie said coldly as they crossed Market Street. But you're right. They all act like that. Every decision, every conflict, every rumor hangs over them like a dark cloud that'll never be able to escape. I'm glad I'll be out of here. 50 more days with them. 50 days? Is that it? Lizzie and I figured out how many school days until graduation. I've got 50 and she's got 58. Are you regretting the move to Minnesota? I managed to help you at least. Oh, I'm just fine. It's like going to a zoo. It's fascinating, actually. I just don't have a horse in the race. They pretty much ignore me, which is fine. I'm not a social threat to their hierarchy, so I'll get my grades and be done with it all. As they crossed the Doc Jones Bridge, Cassie reflected on what she'd already learned about Lake Manitou. It'd be easy to just forget about the ghosts and omens and leave, but that was one of the reasons why she came in the first place. Now that spring had arrived, it was time to stop making excuses. I need to find the willow. As they pulled into the driveway, the kitchen light was still on. Jay hesitated. I know your Grandma Edna really likes having you around. I'm proud of you for doing this, Cassie. Cassie forced a smile and nodded, unable to tell her father the real reason she made the move. An hour later, she turned on her computer and went to go change her clothes. Unlike the more powerful computers at school or at Hiawatha County Sheriff's Department, her computer did little but send messages. But sometimes that was all she needed. By the time she changed, the screen changed to show her desktop image. She found the shortcut to AOL and double-clicked. Grandma Edna complained about the sound of the modem connecting, so Cassie muffled the tower with a blanket and then removed it once the final ping signaled she was on the internet. Lizzie Hohertz had been a godsend. For the past few months, Cassie had been able to vent about her bulldog classmates, give Lizzie updates about her dad, or dream about going off to Notre Dame later in the year. With prom right around the corner, Lizzie had recently pressed Cassie about her two lead candidates, Austin Hiller and Clay McPherson. Unfortunately, Lizzie hadn't left a new message, which was to be expected for a Friday night. Cassie entered her identity, Edgar Allan Poe fan, then plugged in Lizzie 21203. Good news, they lost the game, which means track season is right around the corner. It wasn't even close at the end. Derek fouled out with 5 minutes to go in the game, and the Wolverines won easily. It would have been cool to go to state tournament. What else? I think I've made my decision about prom. I know you think Austin is super hot, but there's something fake about him. At the game tonight, I watched him closely with his classmates like Victor, and the whole time it just felt like a performance. So I'm going to ask Clay to prom. He's such a sweetie and doesn't fit in with anybody. He probably could care less about going, but it would be my way of flipping off the senior class. Obviously, we're not going to be boyfriend, girlfriend or anything, but he looks at me like I'm Princess Peach, and he just fought a dragon to get to me. Anyways, learning tons of cool things at Hiawatha County Sheriff's Department, but I'm down to just a few weekends left. I've run into countless dead ends about Summer, but perhaps Jessica is right about Summer's body showing up when the snow melts. Chapter 48, Dog Eat Dog, Highway 64, April 26th, 1998. A late-season snowstorm dumped nearly a foot of snow and brought back winter to Hiawatha County for another week. Tulips had bloomed, trees budded, and grass had turned vibrant green, but the storm didn't care. Early that Sunday morning, Forsberg felt like he was the only person awake to enjoy the beauty of nature. Spring is always so messy, Forsberg observed, and there is something clean about snow and cold. Running through the heart of Hiawatha County, Highway 64 was a lone road at times. While its 120 miles connected Bemidji to Little Falls, the middle section that ran through Forsberg's county was 2 lanes surrounded by barren fields. When he saw turkey vultures and crows circling in the air, he grew interested, likely just feasting on a dead deer. As soon as he turned onto 36th Street Northwest, he spotted the issue. At first, a bald eagle sitting in the middle of the gravel road caught his eye, but then he spotted the furry corpse on the side of the road. The eagle took flight as he approached, but a pair of turkey vultures remained. It wasn't until he stepped out of the vehicle that the vultures also left the corpse of the dog. Son of a bitch, Forsberg muttered when he saw the 2 bullet holes in the dog. He inspected the recent late season snow, which had several tire tracks since the snowplow had leveled off the surface a few days earlier. When he found 15-inch tracks with a similar tread as before, he knew it was the same bastard who'd been killing dogs across the county. There'd be no trial for such a deed, so he didn't need to photograph the tire tracks or produce a slug from the dog. Once he discovered the culprit, he'd nevertheless make him pay. With his toe, he confirmed that the dog's corpse was frozen to the ground and would need the rendering truck to come pick it up. Several yards ahead, Forsberg spotted dog tracks and strange patterns along with prints in the snow. Blood, he reckoned. There had been more than one dog shot, and one of them survived to run off. 36th Street Northwest split a short distance ahead. The northern fork led to the McGovern Farm and then became Fire Tower Road. The southern fork led to an old abandoned house. A well-fed dog would stay close to the house. These dogs roamed. Forsberg took the southern fork. A private snowplow had opened the southern fork, which made Forsberg even more curious. Spider Lake was a remote 85-acre lake surrounded by old growth, but in winter the leafless woods hid few secrets. When he reached the abandoned farmhouse, he stopped. Everybody knew his habit of patrolling on his way to work, so they knew he was somewhere in the county. He just didn't want dispatch learning that he was again investigating a dead dog. When did I become the dog vigilante? 3 structures remained: an old chicken coop, an abandoned house without windows or doors, and a 60s-era metal machine shed. The snowplow cleared out the entire lot where Forsberg parked. Footprints led to the machine shed, but not the house. Between the house and lot, a narrow path had been cleared by a snowblower. There were also a lot of dog prints all over the area. Better to be safe than sorry. He returned to his CB to let them know where he was and that he was about to do a wellness check, which was bending the truth with no mention of dogs. When he got back, he didn't go to the house, but instead went to the metal machine shed. He could see different types of tracks coming out of the large sliding door that were most likely the snowblower and an ATV. He also noted more dog prints and human prints now as well. He pulled out his flashlight and used it to knock on the metal access door. Silence. To his surprise, the knob turned when he gripped it. "Hiawatha County Sheriff's Department," he said before opening it any further. Without any windows, the building was indeed dark. Just inside the door, he found a portable generator, several gas tanks, and the snowblower right beside a 1975 Dodge truck with snow-packed tires still melting onto the gravel floor. Deeper in the machine shed, he spotted an assortment of fairly new construction equipment and materials, an old pop-up camper, and a light blue 1980 Mercury Capri. His hand flew to the holster. His eyes warily looked for danger. Stepping out of the shed, his pistol led the way. After scanning the area, he made bold strides to get back to his vehicle as quickly as possible. Then he heard a dog let out a cry of alarm. The barking came from the narrow path leading towards the lake, and a black streak came galloping toward him. Forsberg began running toward the vehicle, only to realize he was too slow. He stopped, and with a wide stance, he turned and steadied his gun. Just as the flashing jaws prepared to leap at him, he fired twice. "Son of a bitch," Forsberg cursed in instant regret of the deed. The dog dropped and a second later, the windshield of his vehicle burst into fragments. Bullets cut through the air, and Forsberg dove forward to find shelter beside his car. Rather than getting up and risking a bullet passing through the soft metal, he rolled so that his head brushed up against the wheel of the front driver's side tire. More shots fired, and he took 3 controlled breaths before he rolled back out. With his arms outstretched and his belly on the ground, he squeezed the trigger even before he'd found the sights of his pistol. His 4th bullet struck the shooter's silhouette squarely in the chest. The shooting stopped as quickly as it began, leaving only Forsberg's labored breath to fill the space. What did I just walk into? Knowing adrenaline made his senses accelerate, he purposely waited several more moments before moving a muscle. He rose and inspected his vehicle, which had been peppered by gunfire. The window had been shot out, so he reached for the CB and then spoke the words that would open the floodgates. Shots fired! He stayed by his car, assured that an army of law enforcement would be upon him in minutes. Risking it, he stepped away from the vehicle. Nearby, he saw the poor dog. It disgusted him that he'd been forced to put it down. 50 yards ahead, he saw the body lying on this plowed path. First, he noticed the pistol on the ground. Next, he noticed all the blood. Finally, he recognized the face. He just shot Scat Jensen's son. Above his head, the turkey vultures circled. Chapter 49. Chasing Bigfoot. Canaranzi Creek, April 30th, 1998. As soon as Gary McKenzie parked in front of the gate, he noticed what was wrong. The German Shepherds did not rush to his car. Forsberg's truck had frost in the windshield, which means it had been parked there overnight. With the recent snow melting quickly, there were no fresh snow or mud prints indicating any recent traffic. He slipped on his gloves and hat and opened his car door. He honked his horn 3 times and waited. Will he even want visitors after the shooting? While Forsberg had been on administrative leave, the Jensen shooting had turned into total chaos, and Gary knew his old friend would be suffering in more ways than one. His property isolated him from the media, but not from a friend. A few moments later, he heard the expected gunshot from Forsberg's house deep in the woods. A single shot in the air meant Forsberg was home and waiting for him. Gary made sure his keys were stuffed deep in his pocket and began walking. Stepping between the boulders that kept any vehicles from getting closer, Gary looked up at one of Forsberg's known security cameras and lifted a hand in a casual greeting. Normally, he had to worry about the guard dogs ripping his pant legs from his body, but today, the woods were quiet. A few minutes into the walk, Gary spotted the smoke from the chimney. He'd been to Forsberg's home dozens of times through the years and knew all the roadblocks and booby traps set up for strangers. Forsberg's ranch-style home overlooked the confluence of the Crow Wing River and Canaranzi Creek at a place where the closest neighbor was half a mile away. He spotted Forsberg smoking a cigarette in his open garage door. "Where's the welcome wagon?" Gary called out. "They're safe inside by the fire. Did my ma send you out?" "Nope, I'm coming on my own accord," Gary said, once he grew close enough not to shout. "Have you even left your house?" "Nope. My own damn policies require that I take a 2-week leave of absence following a shooting, so after I gave the BCA my statement, I decided it was best for me to hole up here. Dave can run things for a while." Forsberg let out a cloud of smoke and dropped a cigarette into a nearby bucket. "Can I get you a beer or a smoke?" "Nah, but that fire sounds nice." Forsberg pushed the button to close the garage and led them inside the house. Having known Forsberg for almost 30 years now, Gary knew better than to waste time trying to get him to talk about his feelings. Both dogs greeted them at the door. The big dogs allowed him to pat their heads as they wagged their tails. It was a strange emotional contrast to the pure terror they could inflict on an unwanted intruder. "Did you hear I had to shoot a dog?" Forsberg asked once he stepped into the little mud room between the kitchen and the living room. Big glass windows overlooked the river valley below. Forsberg's stereo played some 70s rock and roll. Over in the living room, the space between the couches, recliner, and entertainment center was filled with over a dozen manila folders spread out over the floor. The 2 men sat on the bar stools of the kitchen island that separated the space from the living room. "I've heard all about it in the news and the paper," Gary finally said. Nothing indicated that Forsberg had suffered emotional trauma after the shooting, but then again, the man knew how to carry his baggage with ease. "The dog didn't know any better." "And the Jensen boy did?" Gary knew a bit of cruelty might open up Forsberg. "Growing weed is not a life or death matter. Why would the kid draw down on me like that?" "It's hard to say. It was a tough situation for you to step into," Gary said. Having learned from experience, he stuck to the case. The newspapers say it was a facility to grow marijuana. A small-time operation with some big bucks behind it. Some designer THC. These kids on the fucking internet. Forsberg paused for a moment. Dave has called me with updates. Sounds like a circus. He made eye contact with Gary, who still had the pulse of the community. So, what's the mood out there? Gossip is running rampant. A meth bust would create a stir. A shooting would create a boil. Arresting Nate Marquette for the murder of Summer Chauvin. I'm sure Dave has his hands full. I've been walking him through it from my couch, Forsberg said. Dave Rabar was his chief deputy who'd stepped in when Forsberg went on administrative leave. Again, Forsberg chose not to confess his feelings, but nevertheless could talk to Gary about the case. With the grow center on Marquette property, they had an easy case for distribution charges. Even before I left the scene, there was plenty of evidence to charge Marquette for the drugs. And for the murder of Summer Chauvin? Forsberg's face tightened in frustration and shook his head. I think Schultz rushed the murder charges. It sounds like all they have is the Chauvin car. No body, no evidence of foul play, nada. Gary knew District Attorney Jeff Schultz by face, but not personally. A day after the shooting, Dave Rabar announced the connection to the Chauvin case. The following day, Schultz announced the arrest. So, what do you think happened? Forsberg shrugged. Darlene, Detective Van Zatten, suspected from the get-go that the girl got into trouble because of drugs. She'd collected a lot of circumstantial evidence about the drugs back in November. I never would have connected it to Nate Marquette and Troy Jensen. I guess we'll see where it leads. Any word on how Scat's doing? Carrie Scat Jensen had been a classmate of Forsberg's back in the day, and the two had butted heads several times through the years. He's probably worried about Scat seeking vengeance. Father Ezra held funeral services on Thursday, and from what I gather, you should save your personal condolences to Scat for the time being. Many in the community feel the death was unnecessary. Folks know that the kid opened fire on you, but you still used deadly force. Like father, like son, Forsberg muttered. Gary couldn't discern if he referenced Scat and Skeeter or Glenn and himself. Even a grizzled veteran could be traumatized by the event. Like father, like son? Forsberg ignored him. You want to know what's really in my craw? The dog settled near Forsberg's feet, and the album ended to leave only the crackle of the firewood. Talking things out is healthy. What? I shouldn't have even been there. I wouldn't have even been near that grow site if I hadn't been trying to find a wounded dog. You think Jensen and Marquette were the ones responsible for killing the other dogs? Oh, hell no. Jensen probably kept the dogs here to protect the place when he was gone. The little shithead was probably about to head off for the day. Someone else shot the first two dogs. That's why the kid was on edge when I showed up. I see, Gary said, but Forsberg didn't offer any more insight. A lot of TV crews have been around town looking for interviews. I've had a few snooping around the property wanting to interview me. I should have just left town, but with the Chauvin car, I knew Dave needed me. Between the funeral and press, the school shut down for the rest of the week. Forsberg's eyes glazed over. I knew those kids at the party out at Lyons knew more than they were letting on. We even interviewed Marquette and Jensen, but neither let on that they'd stolen Summer's car. Months earlier, Lacey insisted that Summer's car would be found at the junkyard in Brainerd. Forsberg checked, but found nothing. Lacey Morrison wanted me... No. No what? I don't want to hear it. I know what she's already thinking, but you can tell her there's a big difference between the two situations. School shooting, Jimmy Nace. Yeah, it's similar to the Mrs. Crane stuff, but I don't even want to hear her theories if it's going to lead me on more wild goose chases. Hey, I get it. The Nancy Crane stuff can be a bit much. Lacey means well. You and I both know that. The coin has two sides, though. You can't focus on the objective facts and ignore the supernatural clues we've been given. I'm not ignoring anything. Back in 1986, did I not ambush that lowlife that was supposed to attack the Nielsen family? And recently, did I not go down the junkyard looking for some fucking stray license plate because Nancy Crane dreamed it 20 years ago? Hey, I get it, Gary repeated. Before Ansel, I thought demons were undiagnosed mental illnesses. Dealing with this stuff can be overwhelming. Does that explain why you've turned to the bottle instead of God? Forsberg asked bitterly. He wants a fight to get his mind off the case. Gary calmed himself before answering. For your information, God and I are just fine. Considering Forsberg's aversion to everything and anything spiritual, he quickly amended his statement. It's the church and I that are struggling. I don't think it's healthy for you to be sitting here all alone stewing about things. He gestured to all the files on the living room floor. Forsberg looked at his mess and shrugged. My little break has been helping me figure stuff out from the past. Even so, perhaps you should be staying with Ansel or with Carson during these hard times. They both offered, but I'll be fine, Forsberg insisted. But when this is all over, I'll need to deal with Scat. I've known him since we were kids, and I shot his boy. Shit. What are the fucking odds? He shuddered. I'll be fine. Will you? At this silence, Gary got up and took a few steps in the living room. Looking over the couch, he could see police files, photographs, and an odd assortment of albums. What is this? Forsberg scoffed. Through the years, I've gathered up cases that have had some sort of connection to the Order of Eos. At times, I feel like I'm chasing Bigfoot, but then there's other times where it all feels shockingly real. When it feels real, I feel like a little boy crawling into the cave to face a grizzly bear. Cave? Is he trying to understand the connections to the Marquette family? You think that's what's going on? You think what's going on has connections to Eos? Forsberg scoffed again. When I was young, dumb, and full of calm, I might have thought that, but now I know it's part of a bigger darkness that's crept into Hiawatha County. The Jensen family suffers because of proximity. Hell, I think the Marquette kid suffers by proximity too. You think Nate Marquette murdered Summer Chauvin? Those two big piles in the middle of the floor, Forsberg started and pointed, are on Levi McPherson and the Marquette family massacre. And here we are, 12 years later, still dealing with this shit. The row beyond it includes files for Rory Stewart, Ewan McGregor, and Red Doby. Something is off with the whole Summer Chauvin situation. What if the Eos puppet masters set up Nate for the murder just to clean house? How so? Well, think of it like the mafia. The Corleone family cleans house and ends up with people it trusts along with eliminating any witnesses. It's what Eos did back in 1962 and 1986. For a long time, that's how I reckoned it. But something always felt wrong about Red, the guy who tried to kill you when you were a kid. Forsberg nodded. See, Padre? I have barnacles growing on my barnacles. With so many of those cases you see, there's always something elusive and mysterious about the way the Order of Eos operated. Now, I think I'm seeing the missing factor. The Vendita Incorporated. The company trying to acquire the state park land, Gary replied. I hear Lacey and Ansel chirping their theories. I listen to everyone, but I've already had it on my radar since 1962. I just never had an explanation for it. Now that little boy who crawled into the cave is staring down a grizzly bear and a dragon. All those broken pieces that didn't fit are about to snap into place, Forsberg shrugged. But hey, if you want me to talk about shooting the Jensen kid, we can talk about that also. You're right. Your mom sent me down here to check on you. Forsberg recoiled but patted the stool beside him. Gary took one last look at the files and sat back down. Tell me your theories about Vendetta. I want to hear what you're thinking. Chapter 50, Old Dog. Split Rock, Minnesota, May 1st, 1998. Wally Crane began to feel lightheaded and knew if he passed out, he'd likely break his arm and die from internal bleeding. Shouting for help had not only been ineffective, but also left him seeing spots. Wally ignored the pain for a moment and took several deep breaths. The metallic horned serpent had him by the wrist, but chose to kill him slowly. Is this how I go out? Wally rubbed the tears from his eyes with his free hand, gritted his teeth, and faced the situation like a man. He'd been working on the LaSalle, one of the Fisher's oldest vehicles. The repair had been simple, installing a new hose. He told Carson, Big Mac, Lacey, and Willow all about it over breakfast before heading out to the garage. Thanks to Carson's internet supplier, the part had arrived the previous day, and all he needed was a screwdriver to do the job. It had gone as easily as expected, and he was a few minutes away from a second cup of coffee when he dropped a screw. Instead of falling all the way through the engine compartment, it fell into the web of the engine compartment. While he'd managed to reach it with just his fingertips, his watch got caught. He'd tried brute force, but only felt a pop in his shoulder. Not exactly the way I'd expected to die. Yet with each passing moment, his legs grew weaker since he'd leaned in slightly to reach down. The problem got worse by the second. He'd heard once that crucifixion didn't kill a person from blood loss, but from asphyxiation. Once his legs gave out, his dangling arm would cause him to slowly suffocate. "Are you laughing at me up in heaven?" Wally silently asked his wife. With his Nancy, it had been sudden and quiet. The tiny blood vessels in her brain had been her weakness. The same brain that taught generations of students and crafted harrowing tales of imagination failed twice following two very real strokes, both in her sleep. I don't want to die like some dipshit. Dipstick. Nancy refused to let him use sailor talk around the girls, so he often found playful ways to cover his curses. Even from beyond the grave, her chiding memory proved to be like a guardian angel. His left hand reached for the dipstick and removed the thin metal gauge from the engine block. On its tip was an inch of honey-colored oil. At first, he tried to see if it could cut the watch band, but with the first patch, he understood how the plan might actually work. Little by little, he transferred oil from the engine block down into the crevice, wiping it onto his arm, wrist, and hand. The repetition of the action left him winded, but the drops and smears of oil did the trick, and his wrist slipped free from the watch, which fell through the engine compartment and to the concrete below. He stumbled backwards and let out a cry of triumph. With weak legs, he leaned against the car and cradled his oil-covered wrist for a few moments as he groaned and cursed about his ridiculous brush with death. He tore off his oily flannel shirt and tossed it on the garage floor and wobbled back into the house dressed in his white tank top. The garage had been built on the far side of the mansion, away from the domestic area, so he entered the building still alone. In the washroom, he held his wrist under the warm water and, glancing up at his reflection in the mirror, realized how close to death he had been. One mistake at his age could be his last. And so much unfinished business. With so much talk about Vendetta lately, he'd reflected on his encounter with Chirani Bassange and his henchman, William Olcott. If he'd done things just a little different, he might have stopped a fierce enemy. Changing oil in the LaSalle would have given him an excuse to go out on patrol like the good old days. He passed by Carson's office, where his rescuer might have heard him if not for the headphones over his ears. Rather than explaining himself, Wally went through the silent kitchen living room and turned down the hallway leading to the bedroom to find a fresh shirt. When he stepped through the doorway, he startled Lacey Morrison. "Oh," she said, standing in front of the bookshelf filled with photos and memorabilia. The door was... "Are you okay? Did you hurt your arm?" He walked over to the closet and pulled out a new flannel shirt. Got in a little tussle with the old LaSalle back in the garage. "What are you doing?" "As always, trying to make sense of things," she said. "Carson's going down rabbit holes." "I saw him clacking away on the computer with his headphones on," Wally said. "This Vendita situation with the state park has everyone rattled. I don't recall her manuscripts mentioning an enemy like this." "Carson has every word on file, so his computer can pull up key words. So far, it's not there. Everything centers around EOS." Lacey fidgeted as she paused. "But, I didn't come down for that. I wanted to talk to you about what happened in 1962. "Oh, that." Wally finished buttoning and sat on the edge of the bed to rest his tired legs. Lacey sat down beside him, saying, "I've read through all of Leonard's interviews with everyone, but I just want to see if I understand things correctly. We think the Nicollet Dam was sabotaged in order to flood the quarry and kill a lot of people. Why? The floodwaters would cover up with what Haggard had dug in the quarry, and the death of so many people would supercharge the evil spirits in Lake Manitou. How's that so far?" "That sounds like the group consensus." He'd been the one who encouraged the others to trust her with more background. Now she rehashed old news with vigor. "Here's what I don't understand. Why would EOS spend decades digging a hole only to suddenly scrap it?" When he hesitated, she quickly amended, "Because we're not buying the bull about it just being a quarry, right?" He'd been the only witness to the murder of Ewan Haggard, who told him with his dying breath about the betrayal of Red Dobie. "It was indeed a fully functioning quarry," Wally corrected. "But yes, I see your point." "What if it wasn't EOS orchestrating it all? I mean, yeah, we know about Triton Corporation and their ties to Stewart, Haggard, and Marquette families here in Hiawatha County, but look what happened to them. To me, it seems like somebody else was trying to stop them." Wally had left Ewan Haggard bleeding to death at the supply office in a desperate attempt to get to the dam. A fresh set of eyes sees it clearly. "Vendita?" Lacey nodded. "EOS believes in their mythology of trying to wake some sleeping god by using ancient relics left over from the Ragnarok. They believe in the magic of Halley's Comet, which is why they were ready to try to do something before Levi. You know, beat them to the punch. I'm thinking EOS has an enemy of some sort." "The Red Thunderbird," he repeated, thinking of 3 boys who'd seen the car. "Huh?" "Chirani Besant was a guest of EOS. In 1961, they flew him into Hiawatha County and showed him all around, under the guise that he was some sort of religious expert. EOS was trying to figure out our blind spots about the prophecies. Or at least that's the bait that EOS bit. So if Chirani Besant was actually with Vendita, then that also means the witch, the henchman, and Red Dobie were his servants." "Red Dobie?" "He was the supply manager at Haggard Quarry. His family had been servants to the Order of EOS for generations." "The perfect spy and the perfect saboteur," Wally said with a chuckle. "EOS did all the heavy lifting, and Vendita swept in and pulled the plug on the whole operation. 30 years later, and it suddenly makes sense." "Here's what worries me." "Oh, please enlighten me," Wally chuckled again. "What were they doing at Bleeding Rock?" "I've been thinking about that a lot recently. And I can't stop thinking about Forsberg shooting the Jensen boy. Nancy dreams something very similar to what happened. If that's true, we're about to find out who killed Summer Chauvin." Her normally beautiful face held an expression of disgust. "Everyone but you treats me like I'm an idiot or I'm insane." Wally knew Forsberg believed enough of it to thoroughly investigate Austin Hiller and Victor Berg, who both had alibis. He felt sorry for Lacey. "We don't think you're an idiot or that you're insane. For my part, I shrugged off Nancy for years also. Levi did something very important in 1986. He changed everything. It's like he knew what EOS and Vendita were up to and pulled the rug out from under their feet. Everything that Nancy dreamed about got changed because of Levi. If Levi could somehow wage war against the future and time, then what's to stop Vendetta from doing the same? This is a bit much for me, but for Lacey's sake, he tried to understand. So you think the witch was trying to, what? Fight Lily? Just like Trani Besant sent his guy to flood the quarry, all that death magic was meant to reach back in time to undo everything. At least that's what my Back to the Future brain came up with. I knew it. I knew something was amiss. Despite the flash of agony, Wally put his arm around Lacey and gave her a hug. This is good, Lacey. Let's go tell Carson about it. Can you do all the talking? You know how guys are when I talk. I can do all the talking, but feel free to jump in if I explain it the wrong way. Wally's legs still ached, but they made the long walk back to Carson's office. But I can rest when I'm dead. Until then, I'll keep fighting. Chapter 51, Down the Rabbit Hole. Split Rock, Minnesota, May 4th, 1998. Where is everybody? Cassie wondered as she entered the hallway where the seniors normally sat. Having attended the funeral on Thursday, she knew Skeeter Jensen's spot in the hallway would be empty. She also knew that Nate Marquette had been arrested, not only for owning and operating the underground marijuana grow site, but also for his involvement in the disappearance of Summer Chauvin. But only Derek Gregory sat in the hall. No Miranda Penny, the cast-off girlfriend. No Madison Ullman, the jealous rival. Not even Oster or Victor showed up. Realizing she'd stopped mid-step, Cassie casually continued and sat down beside Derek. When the Bulldogs basketball season ended abruptly in the playoffs, Derek had sulked, pouted, and bullied his way through the hallways like an alpha bully. Now he seemed to have shrunk to half his size. I can't believe Summer's gone, he said without even looking up. I really had hoped that she'd just run away from home and left us all behind. The most popular boy in the school had gone through the ringer after a tryst with Summer Chauvin right before she vanished. First, it broke up his relationship with Madison Ullman, the alpha bully girl in the school. Second, it made him a prime suspect in the investigation. I really loved her, too. I wish I could shoot that bastard through the bars of his jail cell. Does your uncle leave keys sitting around the house? Until now, Cassie had been a pariah for being new, for showing up right after Summer vanished, and for being the niece of the sheriff, which was worse than being a principal's kid. Want me to check? Derek laughed off the suggestion, a sign he'd been joking. At least he's finally acting like a real human. Crazy stuff, Cassie offered. I suppose you've known all these people your whole life. Shows that you really don't know people. When we got to high school, everyone, even me, turned on Summer like she was toxic waste. But it turns out the problem was everyone else. Can't wait to get the hell out of this place. 18 days left, Cassie roughly estimated. You're counting too? Cassie nodded. I'm just going to keep my head down and mind my own business. Which was a lie. Since the shooting, she'd become even more obsessed with Summer Chauvin case and sponged up every bit of gossip she could learn. But she knew not to push it with Split Rock class of 1998. She and Derek painfully tried making small talk until the first hour bell rang. With so many seniors still missing, even after school had canceled classes the previous week, the upperclassmen teachers waved the white flag and threw in the towel. Cassie went to the library to find a new book to read. In the new releases section, she found Bag of Bones by Stephen King, Message in a Bottle by Nicholas Sparks, I Know This Much Is True by Wally Lamb, and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, which she picked up. At the front desk, she spotted the brand new Power Mac G3 sitting beside the older Performa tower and monitor. Can I check out the new Mac? We haven't finished setting it up yet, but you can sign out the other one. Oh, sure. Just remember to log out any applications you use. Of course. The librarian had little patience for computers in her space, and unlike the computer lab downstairs, the library computers were fair game for students to do anything they wanted. One of the students had installed Yahoo Instant Messenger, which allowed her to communicate with Lizzie and other friends in Baltimore. Sure enough, once the application opened, another person's messaging account was already signed in. She cleared it out and typed in her own account, Edgar Allan Poe fan. She needed a vent. Lizzie Hohertz had been a godsend. For the past few months, Cassie had been able to complain about her Bulldog classmates, give Lizzie updates about Jay, or dream about going off to Notre Dame later in the year. With prom coming on Friday, she wanted to talk to her friend Lizzie about the schedule for the night. Unfortunately, Lizzie did not respond. Obviously, she's normally in class at this time. After a few minutes of waiting, Cassie shut down the program, then remembered the librarian's comment. As she opened Instant Messenger back up to clear her name, she realized the flaw of having such a program in a public space. Hold on one second. Even before taking the job in the records department, she knew her way around computers. In order for someone to have a Yahoo Instant Messenger account, a personal email was needed, not one set up by the school. Maybe these idiots used the school computer to communicate about summer. After logging out, she moved her cursor to the hard drive and found the OS 9 operating system folders. She located Apple menu, internet access, email files, and hundreds of emails open in the archive. She scrolled to October 16th, 1997. Of course, nothing. It was some sort of holiday weekend. Monday, October 20th filled the screen. She held her breath, and she found several from the following Monday. Mad Hatter from March Hare, October 20th, 1997. I thought you said we both needed to be in school to avoid suspicion. If the cops start investigating people, those who skip school will look guilty. Get here now. Cassie felt her heart pounding in her chest. To Mad Hatter from March Hare, October 20th, 1997. You called in sick? The cops are here and talking to anyone that attended the party. Apparently, they've taken Nate Marquette and Derek Gregory to St. John to get a full interrogation. Her car is missing. At first, the faces of Nate Marquette and Skeeter Jensen entered her mind as the identities of the two monikers, but the reference to Nate being taken to the interrogation threw off her theory. To March Hare from Mad Hatter, October 20th, 1997. Sorry for missing your messages. Yeah, called in sick so I could clean the car for any DNA or evidence. If they find her body, we'll be the prime suspects. Can you think of anybody that would have seen us driving around that night? What is this? Whose car are they talking about? Skeeter Jensen was now dead and Nate Marquette was in jail. Summer's car obviously had been taken from the scene of the party that night to the secret drug facility at Spider Lake. The conversation, though, didn't match the facts. This isn't Skeeter and Nate. Cassie's hand came off the keyboard as she realized she was looking at a piece of the puzzle. She thought about calling Uncle Brian, but remembered he was on paid leave and not at the office. For all she knew, the emails were already in evidence, so she calmed herself and looked for other clues. To Mad Hatter from March Hare, October 20th, 1997. What if she's dead in the woods by my place? If some hunter finds her body, they'll question me. I'm not smart like you. I don't know what to say. Why did you let that bitch into your car? This is really bad. Nope, definitely isn't Skeeter and Nate. To March Hare from Mad Hatter, October 20th, 1997. Calm down. For all we know, she figured out a way to get back into her car and she just ran away from home. You say you saw how freaked out she was. She went crazy. Do you have any marks on you? You obviously showered since then, right? To Mad Hatter from March Hare, October 20th, 1997. I'm worried they'll find DNA on her. We should have gone after her. There's no way she walked back to Nate's party. That's 10 miles away. I worried she ran into a tree, knocked herself out, or died somewhere. I know we checked for a body along Old Copper Road, but the old woods are pretty thick. She could have fallen into the lake or river and drowned. If they find a body, I'm seriously fucked. To March Hare from Mad Hatter. I'm coming to school at lunch. Relax. No one but Summer saw us. We both have good alibis. Your folks saw us when we stopped by your place. My folks saw us when we arrived. If you weren't such a fucking pig, we would have dropped her off at home and been done with this. Be cool until I get there. Cassie copied and pasted the Mad Hatter email address. Then another idea led her to frantically scramble through her bag for an unused floppy disk. She inserted it into the computer and copied the messages onto the disk. Then, returning to Yahoo IM, she pasted in the email. Shit, if I use my handle, he'll know it's me. I'm the only one from Baltimore. She paused when she realized she assumed it was a guy. Has to be a guy. I think they were talking about rape. She also thought about logging in using one of the other account names, but without the password, she knew it was also a dead end. The library bell rang, and Cassie almost jumped out of her chair. She ejected the floppy disk drive and hurried to her next class. In her next class, she sat trying to figure out the clues. Just like the first week, everyone was suddenly a suspect. From the way the two talked, she eliminated all the females in the class. She also knew to eliminate Nate Marquette and Derek Gregory, who were both mentioned in the email. When her teacher ended activities for the day, she excused herself. Down in the commons, she found a public phone outside the gym doors and called the Hiawatha County Sheriff's Department rather than 911. Mia Donaldson answered. Dan will know if all the computers were checked. Hi, Mia. This is Cassie Campbell. Could you put me through to Dan down in records? A moment later, she had Eklund on the line. Hey, Dan. Sorry to bother you, but with so much going on with the Summer Chauvin case, I had a stray thought just a few minutes ago. Why does that not surprise me? What are you thinking, Nancy Drew? I was just on a public computer at the high school library, and I found a bunch of odd emails still in the system folder. They were from October and seemed to be mentioning Summer Chauvin. You don't say, he said with a hint of surprise and regret. Right. So did anybody collect evidence from the computers here? How does that work? Good question. I'm almost positive that Detective Irvin had the BCA subpoena and collect her email records. Irvin is a dinosaur, though. He still writes up his reports on paper. What about student accounts? This was a few months back, but I'm almost positive I remember processing emails into the records. Where are you going with this? I found a couple email accounts, aliases of course, not only referencing Summer and the party, but also wondering where her car and body might be found. I think everyone was wondering that. Here's a problem. If it was a public computer, I don't think it could even be used as evidence. I think you need to subpoena the software company for the official correspondence. After all, if you found it, anybody could have accessed and manipulated the evidence, right? Yeah, I suppose, she surrendered rather than arguing with him. Perhaps I can just show him. How late are you working? Normal day, I suppose? I don't have a car, and without Uncle Brian, there's no way for me to get to St. John. Could you stop by after work? I made a copy of the emails onto a floppy disk. Perhaps if I show them to you, you could decide what they are. Sure, I can swing over, but just let the professionals do the job, okay? Promise me? I know. Thanks, Dan. Cassie returned to her class, but knew
Chapter
she
52.
found something important. Bird of Yore. Split Rock High School, May 4th, 1998. Clay spent his afternoon once again meticulously cleaning the greenhouse. He loved that greenhouse and made sure each and every tool was accounted for and put in the right place. With the arrival of spring, the young plants would soon be experiencing a surge in growth, so he made sure each and every one was ready to thrive. I'm sorry that I won't be able to take care of you anymore. He looked at himself in the reflection of the glass and realized that everything from his hair to his t-shirt matched what he'd seen several months earlier. The future is now, he realized. Then Cassie Campbell entered the classroom and walked to the greenhouse. His heart sank even further. "Hi, Clay," she said cheerfully. "Should have known to find you here. How's it going?" "Not good." "You look sad. Did you know Skeeter well?" "I knew him, but I didn't like him. I'm worried about what's going to happen to Nate. He was always really nice to me. I guess I didn't get to know him, or Skeeter. To think, a few days ago, both of them were walking around the school." Since the future had obviously arrived, he dared a bold statement. "They didn't kill Summer Chauvin." Cassie took it in stride. "I find it hard to believe also. Perhaps she can explain what everyone is saying." "My mom and I watched the news last night. How they found her car. Why do you think they took her car?" "I suppose Skeeter and Nate had to hide the evidence." "But if they didn't kill her, why would they take her car?" "You're right, Clay." "The facts don't make sense, but maybe the motivations do. From what it sounds like, Nate and Skeeter were definitely selling drugs, so maybe Summer owed them money or something." "Huh," Clay said, and pondered her theory and compared it to the known facts. "I suppose that makes sense. Maybe they were just holding her car as ransom or something." "Maybe," Cassie added. "Why don't you think Nate and Skeeter did it? Do you think there might be others responsible?" Clay lost his breath. "Maybe," he repeated. "I liked Nate, even if he was a Marquette. I think Summer liked him too." "I heard rumors about the two of them. I heard rumors about Summer and Derek and Summer and Miranda, so what do I know?" Clay didn't know what to say. "She was a lesbian for a while." Cassie chuckled at Clay's blunt assessment. "Well, I'm not judging her on that, but it seems her personal life was a bit turbulent. Who knows what happened out in the pines?" "Yeah, who knows," Clay repeated. "I haven't talked to my uncle about what happened, but I found something that was a bit peculiar. Do you know anybody who's really into Alice in Wonderland?" "I hate that big smiling cat." Cassie laughed. "Yeah, the Cheshire cat freaked me out too, but not as much as that crazy Queen of Hearts. We've got it on VHS. The Mad Hatter and March Hare," Cassie declared. "Know anybody who likes hats?" "Everybody around here wears hats." "Well, we can't all have cool hair like you. How about March birthdays?" "Kathy Walker's birthday is March 11th. She's pregnant. Victor Berg's birthday is March 15th. "Victor?" "We used to sit together on the bus when we were kids, but now he's mean. I wish Austin didn't like him." "You used to ride the bus with Victor. Where does he live?" Clay felt his heart skip a beat. Levi was right. The future would eventually come if he just relaxed and let it happen. He lives over by Chippewa Beach on Lake Manitou." "Uh-huh. To get there, you'd take Old Copper Road?" "I suppose. The road doesn't go straight to his house. It turns south at the Bible camp and then comes up from Sterling Junction. The ground is very rocky there, so I don't think the engineers could finish the road all the way to the west side of the lake." Cassie paused. "I don't see Austin ever wearing hats. I suppose he wants to show off those frosted tips." "He collects baseball hats. He plays baseball. He's got hats for every team hanging in his bedroom," Clay said, and he could see Cassie go deep into thought. Something he said concerned her. "You don't think they had something to do with Summer's death, do you?" "Victor and Austin?" Cassie murmured. "I never said that. There was just something I was trying to figure out." "Stay away from Victor Berg. He's crazy," Clay insisted. He still didn't understand what happened to poor Summer over at Lion State Park. "But the news said Victor and Austin weren't even at the party. So how could they be part of this?" Cassie stood up. "I don't know. Maybe they were just out driving around." distracted smile came over her face. "Thanks for the talk, Clay." "May the 4th be with you," Clay called out as she passed out the door. She flitted away, leaving him alone. Clay felt like crying. Everything was about to change. A dark shadow caught his eye. He gasped when he saw a raven land atop the edge of the school roof. It wasn't Fozzie, but he still knew who said it. "It's almost time, isn't it?"